This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 145 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. This episode is about volunteering experiences while travelling. And volunteering is something that's become more and more popular for travellers over the years. And who doesn't want to give back while you travel, especially, where often the ones who are coming from quite a position of privilege. Well, I mean, in the first place we're, wealthy enough to actually go travelling, which is, pretty special and pretty lucky. So giving back during at least part of your trip is becoming pretty popular. They talk about the term voluntourism now. But volunteering isn't all that simple, is it? So there's lots of, there's lots of ways you might think you're giving back, but it's actually not beneficial. I mean, the kind of classic example of that is the issue of orphanage tourism. Sorry to get so heavy so quickly. I should have said, hello, how are you going? But anyway, it was only, a few years back that I learnt that orphanage tourism can be a bit of a problem. It's particularly problematic in Cambodia, for example. So it can be the case that tourists are taken to visit and tour through orphanages, but the children there aren't orphans. They have parents, alive and well, but they're from poor families, usually rural families, and they're removed from the families, to be told that they'll, this will give them a better life and all that. But, I mean, first of all, surely staying with your parents is a better life to start with, no matter the wealth involved, I think. And, of course, the conditions in these orphanages aren't necessarily that great anyway, and it's really kind of just a big sometimes you got to watch out for these things. Sometimes just a ruse to get money from visiting tourists. So anyway, it's just one of the examples of where, voluntourism and volunteering when you travel becomes problematic. I'll leave a link in the show notes to some more info from Save the Children here in Australia about orphanage tourism. But anyway, to give some, positive thoughts to this whole volunteering experiences while travelling, because there are lots of ways to do this in a really wonderful way to give back and make it a real win-win situation. So today I've got 3 guests who have had great volunteering experiences while travelling. My first guest is Ella Loeffler. Now, Ella's currently doing an internship at Langtanga Turtle Watch in Malaysia. She just finished her degree in ecology, so this is right down her alley. She's involved in things like patrolling beaches for the turtles. So it's the green sea turtles they're endangered, and the problem is that it's still legal to sell and eat their eggs. It's quite popular, and that's a problem because they're endangered. And so if the eggs keep getting taken and eaten, there's not many new baby turtles. So their program at Langtanga involves monitoring the nests, buying the eggs off landowners if it's a private land, and then hatching them out and getting all these new baby green sea turtles into the world. So Ella and I had a great conversation, and I did ask her then, after she explained what she's actually up to, I asked her how she thinks you can find a good volunteer program to take part in when you travel.
So I think it's a really good question, and something I also really, think a lot about before I've been applying for this kind of stuff. But I think first of all, anyone who wants to volunteer, regardless of their background, there are some really brilliant things out there that you can do. And also combining a holiday with volunteering, I think can always be a pretty amazing experience. So for example, with Langtanga, we take volunteers to the island who there's no, other than being over 18, there's no sort of guidelines. You can be from any background, any experience. And I think it can be hard sometimes to work out if an organisation is just sort of trying to get your money or there's actually, something that you're contributing. But if you know what you're looking for, and if you sort of do a bit of research into the organisation, I think it can be, you can find some great stuff. And so Langtanga, the volunteers are actually really important, just for we just need people to patrol the beaches at the end of the day. And so it's kind of a bit of, you get a trade of you're helping out with what we need done, and with helping with the conservation stuff, and then you get to go snorkeling and do fun stuff and have a bit of a holiday at the same time.
And you're in a beautiful place.
Yeah. And Langteng is pretty amazing. It's not for everyone. It's a jungle camp, sleeping outdoors, sort of just under sort of a hut thing. But it's one of the most amazing experiences I've had. It's pretty special.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really wonderful. Yes, it gives me tingles to hear it. What other kinds of volunteer, when you were kind of researching to find where you wanted to volunteer, what other kind of places did you find, or what were red flags to you? What can someone else do if they're looking? How can they really figure out, is this the right place?
Yeah, so I think, I guess for me it was a little bit different because I do have a degree in this sort of stuff. So I obviously, didn't expect to come overseas and be paid because, again, I'm sort of the white girl coming to learn. But I think for me, anything that was asking for, ridiculous amounts of money was sort of a red flag.
Sure.
Obviously, the volunteer programs are an important way for, organisations to support themselves. So it is, and they're providing you with food and accommodation and the rest of it. So it is obviously reasonable to expect to be paying something.
Yeah.
But I think you want to be checking. To be honest, reviews are always really good because if you've been there and can tell you what it's like, or if you can get in touch with someone that's been there. But yeah, I think especially with animal stuff, as long as it doesn't look like, I think where you have to start being careful is with some of the sanctuaries that hold the animals there. As long as it's sort of a wildlife rehab or sanctuary kind of thing, that I think it's okay. But sometimes you can get, those weird sort of elephant parks that just sort of, hold them captive or whatever. But it can be really hard to see on the internet. And sometimes the reality is you just have to go try it. And I'd heard good things about this organisation, but didn't really know what to expect, and could just as well have come here and hated it. But luckily, it's a brilliant organisation, and I was quite lucky to find it.
Yeah, and I think, even just, talking to me about it means that more people will find out that this is a good place. And I think, looking for reviews and that word of mouth aspect is important. You're so right. I remember last year I think it was on Facebook, a kind of a video went a bit viral I saw of, or a newspaper article or something. It was people, or a guy playing the piano in an elephant sanctuary, and it was supposed to be, it was saying, it's so wonderful for the elephants, blah, blah, blah. I was like, oh, this is kind of cute, and so the first thing I did was then go, type the name of the sanctuary and, is it ethical or something like that. And quickly I came across reviews of people who'd been there and discovered that they weren't running it very well, et cetera, et cetera. So, thank goodness for the internet. It's a lot easier to find these things out these days. But like you say, sometimes it's just you've got to use your, best judgment and then hope a bit and turn up and hope it turns out to be okay. Yeah. And
look, I think, at the end of the day, most, you want to believe the best of most people and hope that they're actually trying to make a difference and a good impact. So, I think most places out there hopefully would be good.
Yeah. I think you're right. It's the same with, kind of the kindness of strangers when you travel. 99% of the time it all works out. And especially if you've done a bit of due diligence first, then the chances are good. Yeah, and I guess, that's part of travel, that you never quite know what's coming your way, and, part of you has to just let go and hope for the best and see what happens, Yeah, you can't always plan everything. Yeah, and that's part of the magic too. Yeah, definitely. So I guess the short answer to that original question of how do you find a good volunteering program to get involved with when you travel is do your research as much as you can. You'll never know for sure really until you get there, but certainly a bit of research can quickly turn up if a program is not a really great one, because someone will have written about it thanks to the internet. So that was very useful information. Part of Langtenga's program involves the opportunity to adopt turtles and their nests. Or maybe it's just the nests. I'm not sure. Let me check. We'll leave a link in the show notes anyway, because it sounds like Ella is right on the ground of a really important organisation there. And if you can help out, then that's something that we can do. So I'll leave that link in the show notes. Now, my next guest today is Megan Hurst. Megan and I travelled together in Cambodia and Vietnam last year. So I just always love chatting with Megan, and she has quite a lot of experience now doing volunteer work in Mexico. She lives in California, so it's just down the road, and we had a chat about some of that and how it all came about.
I think the biggest life-changing travel moment for me is when I realized that traveling really should be about respecting and honoring the culture and the country that you are visiting and giving more than you take from that place. And so something like one trip that kind of has catapulted me into the way I travel now. And like I said, with respecting the culture and the country and the people and all that, it was the first time I just simply went across the border into Mexico. And so growing up in Southern California, growing up as an American, it's kind of like people are always really cautious and really like, why would you go to Mexico? Like, there's no reason to, like, it's dangerous. Like, just kind of, we act like it doesn't, not that it doesn't exist, but it's like someplace you just don't belong or someplace you shouldn't go, which is such a shame because it's such a beautiful country.
And so nearby.
Exactly. I think there's this little bubble that, you know, we live in that's like, it's dangerous, don't go there. And I mean, of course, yeah, it kind of does have that reputation around the whole world, and drugs and gangs and stuff like that. So it's not something to like just go over there like, la-di-da, it's, you know, the
you need to be
place
cautious.
on Earth. You need to be cautious, but I don't think that's a reason to completely write off going there or keep you from going there at all. So it's crazy because it's such a drastically different world, literally just divided by a line in the earth. And so the first time I went to Baja across the border into Mexico was about 2.5 years ago. And I did a house build trip. So it's kind of like Habitat for Humanity. You go and you build a house for people who are literally living in the dirt with like 2x4s and like a tarp over their head.
Right.
And they're migrant workers, and that's how they live with their family. And the kids really suffer from respiratory illness and like really treatable illnesses. You know, diarrhea they die from, like crazy things, just because of their living conditions and not access to sanitation or clean water. And so just being able to drive like less than 2 hours from where I live such a, you know, comfortable life and such a privileged life to changing somebody else's life so drastically, I think was like a big thing that changed me and made me realize like can be so much more to travel. And I think that weekend I connected with the people and the culture in Mexico so much more deeply than I would on a typical like tourist trip, you know, where you just get shuffled from place to place and you see kind of what's curated and what's picked for you. Like I really saw like literally the dirt that country had, and not that, you know, my country doesn't have that kind of stuff too, but like you see the people and how they live and struggles, and then also the beautiful parts of it too that come from that. So
yeah, exactly. How did you come to go on that house build trip? You know, what made you do that, or did a friend invite you along, or what happened?
So when I came back from Nicaragua, I got a part-time job at Lululemon, just selling yoga clothes, because I was like, I'm a yoga teacher now, and let's try to, you know, get into that industry. And then because of that, Lululemon has like ambassadors. So each store has a few ambassadors for the brand. And so one of the ambassadors, his name is Mike, he leads these house build trips through another organization. So it was kind of like I had this new job and he was leading a trip down there. Like, I mean, I think it was like a week and a half later. And some of my coworkers were going from the store. And so I was like, can I come? Like, that sounds great. Like, it's a cheap thing to do to help other people. And I had never been to Mexico before. So I just jumped on, and I just come from Central America. So I was kind of like this sounds great. Like kind of back into that. And I was kind of like almost shocking how I had traveled pretty far to get to Nicaragua and then come back home. And then I traveled just like 2 hours drive, and it was like really similar. I mean, like the language and like the people and the way the country looks. And so I was just like, whoa. And I kind of like that weekend was just a life-changing moment because like it was someplace that I could go to a drastically different world, so close to home, and feel like I'm traveling and experiencing something new. But it's also always been kind of with the intention of volunteering and giving back, which I think makes travel so much more enriching. So yeah, it's like it's an easy little weekend trip. And I always meet the coolest people on those trips too, because it's like like-minded people coming together. I mean, not everybody's like, I'm going to drive across the border to Mexico and like build a house for a weekend for my type of fun. You know, like I think it takes a certain kind of person also to say yes to those kinds of things.
I know from further conversations I've had with Megan and following her online, now that we're not travelling together anymore, I know that she's also involved with some animal rescue and animal care groups in Mexico and pops down there to help out with that. And does all sorts of good things. So I'm always keen to chat about that. And she definitely knows how to figure out a good place to do some volunteer work. My final guest today is Eva Vesterling, and Eva and I were chatting about a trip she went on to the Philippines, which included a volunteering component as well.
Earlier this year, I went on a 2-week trip to the Philippines with a charity organization that's called Give Back Giveaway. It was founded by 2 travel bloggers, one of which is Johnny Ward, who finished traveling every country in the world early this year. So I stumbled across his blog at some point when I was researching, I think, Oman or something, and I found out that he wanted to go to Yemen, and then I started following him. And he posts about these Give Back Giveaway trips a lot on social media, of course, because he needs to advertise. And it sounded really interesting, and the places they go to and the things they do. So I actually followed that it must have been last year, because I followed it for a year, I think, before I decided I wanted to go. And so what they do is they raise money. So the goal is to get $10,000 US, I think, together for each trip. And you can donate online. And from all the people that donated to a certain trip, they will draw one lucky person who will get to go on the trip for free, which I find an awesome concept.
That is really cool. What a great idea.
And then when you want to go on those trips, you have to pay for the trip, plus, depending on where you go, I think for the Philippines it was $300 US as your donation,
right,
on top of whatever you might have donated before to win or whatever.
Yeah.
And for me, it was a very last minute decision. They posted on Facebook that they still have 2 places available or something like that. And I was like, oh, it starts in 2.5 weeks, but yeah, maybe I would like to have a holiday. That would actually be pretty great. So I wrote to them on Facebook. I was like, is there still a place left on that trip? And they were like, yeah, sure, no worries, we still have a place for girls, so come along. I'm like, okay, great. So I booked the flight and booked the trip and made my donation, and so we met in Manila, and then just spent the first night there, and in the morning we drove like 3 or 4 hours north into a little village where there's a school, and those projects are always about educational institutions. So they always do something for a school, which I love, because, I believe in education being the most sustainable change you can bring anywhere. So what they had done with the money that was donated before is they actually paid a group of people to build a new building for, in that case, how did they call it? I'm not sure what exactly the name was, but it's basically learning skills you can use if you want to go into hospitality work. So like kitchen, making beds in a hotel. You know, they want like home. No, I think they said home economics, but it wasn't about economics at all. But so, you know, it would have been fitted with a big kitchen so they can learn how to prepare food and, you know, a couple of rooms that need to be made up and whatever. They learn all those hands-on skills that they can use. You know?
Really saleable skills that they can really get a job with. Yeah,
exactly. So, because I mean, the school has been there forever. And it's led by a Filipino nun. And she's like, what did she say? She's 74, but she always said, but I look like 47.
Oh, cute.
And seriously, she didn't look her age. She was very like energetic and, you know, awesome personality. I mean,
awesome.
She has great spirit. And so she, I think she said that she had met the Pope or something like years and years ago.
Wow.
In the Philippines when he was there for like a church day, whatever they call that. Cool. And somehow that inspired her to take care of the local communities because, you know, people that live in the city, can go to school, they get education, whatever, but they have lots of, those local villages, you know, in the middle of nowhere, in the mountains that are so far away from everything. They don't have roads. So they are very uneducated, and they approached her, or she went there and talked to them, and they said what they need most is to learn how to read and write like the grown-ups, because now, the like industries would come and try to buy the land of them and sort of tell them all the things that are in the contract. But of course, none of that was true. And then they would sign with a fingerprint or something and everything would be gone. And so they wanted to learn to read and write. And that's how she started out. And she had like from the 80s, I think. And she had grown that into like a huge school where you could get like from first grade all the way to qualification for university for all the kids. And because the villages are so remote, some of the kids actually have a 16 or 20-hour journey just to get there. So of course, they have dormitories, and the kids come at the beginning of the year and leave just for the school holidays, you know. And she runs that whole thing.
Wow.
Pretty much by herself. Like, I mean, she has teachers and some help, of course, you know, kitchen and whatever, but she is the one that's doing all of it. And so I think they picked a fantastic place for that project. And the building that was sponsored by us, I think makes a lot of sense because not everyone will go to university.
Of course.
You know, so they can learn some hands-on skills. And well, sadly, they were a bit behind schedule because I think the weather had been bad or something. So the building wasn't finished when we got there. Otherwise, we would have painted it. But what we did instead was actually paint some of the dormitories. But Sister Mary was really insistent that we only paint the insides because she said if the buildings look really pretty from the outside, the villagers will come and ask her for money because they will think she's rich.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
You know? So we had to paint inside only, and then we cleared up the basketball court they had and made it look pretty again, and generally helped with the building work. Like some of the people actually sifted sand for the cement, and you know, like there was lots of little things to do. And I think even though, I mean, it's just minor work, you know, and I guess that's the good thing about it, that we're not taking somebody's paycheck away from them, right?
Yeah.
We are just helping out a bit. What we did was bring money that's spent locally and will benefit that school. And that's why I really, really like the concept that they're working with.
I especially think that the point Eva makes about not taking someone's paycheck is really important. I think when we volunteer, it's important not to be doing something that really would be better if they employed local people to do, to keep local people employed and you know, keep the money that we might bring circulating in the local economy. So I appreciate that she pointed that out. I think that's really important. But that give back giveaway sounds like a great program too, and I'm going to leave a link in the show notes to them. So I wonder if any of you have done some volunteer work when you're traveling. If you have, come along to our Facebook group and tell me all about it. So I haven't done any trips yet, which are strictly kind of volunteering stuff. But I've got a real taste for it after working with the empowerment tourism concept through Hands-on Journeys last year. I know you've heard me talk about them before, but I love the work that they do. And yeah, I'm very lucky. I live a very privileged existence, and I would like to find lots of ways to give back to the rest of the world. So come along to our Facebook group. It's called Thoughtful Travellers. If you're not already a member, search for it in Facebook and request to join, or just find a link in the show notes. For this episode, the show notes are at notaballerina.com/145. In the show notes, there'll be links to a few things we've talked about, plus, of course, our fabulous guests. So there'll be a link to Langtenga, where Ella is volunteering with the green sea turtles. There's a link also to Megan's website, marlaswithamission.com, and also Eva's blog, notscaredofthejetlag.com. I still think that's one of the best blog names ever. And also I'll link to Give Back Giveaway, which Eva mentioned. So please come along to the Facebook group and tell me about your experiences of volunteering while travelling, and we can all figure out together some other ways to make the world better and to keep travelling as well. Sounds perfect, right? Thank you very much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.